Hello Residents, this is an announcement before the main video. We are currently doing a giveaway on Twitter. If we reach 2,000 followers, I will be giving away this Resident Evil Village art piece. It is one of the 4 flasks from Resident Evil Village, in this case House Beneviento. To enter, all you have to do is to go onto social media and find R.E.T.I.N.A 8719 or click the link in the video description below. On the profile, go to the pinned post and like it, and also follow, and you will be entered into a prize draw that will take place when we reach 2,000 followers. Once we've got a name picked out of the hat, you will have a choice of one of the 4 flasks to pick from to take home. I will be sending this out to whoever wins, so please make sure that there are no restrictions on delivery from the UK to where you are. With that, I'll say good luck to you all, and enjoy the video. We are currently in the midst of a remake marathon when it comes to Resident Evil games in the last 3 years. So far we have had Resident Evil 2 and 3 both get the remake treatment through the use of the RE engine, giving them an up-to-date and fresh look to match with Resident Evil 7 and Village. There have been constant rumours of Resident Evil 4 being given the same treatment as well, along with the announcement of Resident Evil 4 getting a VR remaster. This has only been reinforced more with the confirmation that Resident Evil 4 has played a role in influencing the development of Village, possibly hinting at assets being reused for the inevitable remake of 4. Fans still clamour for remakes of Code Veronica and Outbreak Files ahead of 4, and you can see my take on potential remakes of those games as well on my channel. But some have even called for a remake of the first Resident Evil with the RE engine to cover the whole trilogy. Even attempts by fans have been done recently using a similar style to Resident Evil 4, and a first-person attempt in the Unreal Engine. To top it off, the official Resident Evil Twitter account quoted the final page of the Keeper's Diary from the first Resident Evil. But many Rezzers on social media took this as a hint from Capcom that they were remaking Resident Evil again. But even more strange, some took this as a hint about an official announcement for Resident Evil 4 remake. But do we really need another remake of the first Resident Evil? What would be the benefits of revisiting the mansion once again? And what pitfalls could we face with remaking this iconic game once more? The first entry in the Resident Evil franchise started out in 1996, initially being a spiritual remake to retro NES game Sweet Home, now with an expanded story, pre-rendered 3D gameplay, and being one of the most influential games of the PS1 era, and setting the standard in the newly coined survival horror genre. It would end up setting the benchmark for the franchise, which would only be surpassed by its sequels 2, 4, 7, and Village, which would all make their mark in the industry in their own ways. Even with Village looking to take the honour as one of the greatest Resident Evil games of all time. Resident Evil would get a remake in 2002, giving us a more detailed 3D environments, an expanded story, and a much more eerie and terrifying world for the surviving STARS members to explore. We still had the multiple endings and paths to follow, along with the addition of new monsters and the tragedy of Lisa Trevor. Despite these additions, we know that Resident Evil still had some niggling problems, with not having a clear canon story and an inconsistent characterization of Rebecca Chambers between Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil. Let's weigh up what positives we can gain from Resident Evil getting the RE engine treatment. The visuals of the game would make a huge leap first off, and seeing characters like Rebecca, Barry, Wesker, Enrico and Richard all get a modern makeover through the power of the RE engine would be a sight to behold. The zombies would be their usual unsettling and disgusting selves, while slowly morphing into the Crimson Heads. And seeing the power of the RE engine finally used to bring back the crows, spiders and chimeras would be great. Even the bosses would benefit from a makeover, with Yawn, Plant 42, Lisa Trevor and the Tyrant all being potentially more horrific than their original incarnations. The only potential downside visual wise is the environments not living up to the originals, with them either been tampered with too much or lacking the charm they had in the 2002 remake. The damage system we saw in the zombies in Resident Evil 2 remake would look stunning in the setting of the Spencer Mansion, maybe going as far as to apply it to the hunters and some of the bosses like Yawn. Seeing more unique areas like the Aqua Ring, Catacombs and the garden areas all redone with the RE engine would be great too. Seeing how the RE engine would be used to recreate the Black Tiger's nest would most likely be reminiscent of the Drain Demos nest from the Resident Evil 3 remake, and one of the more scary locations to visit as well. The gameplay of the Resident Evil remake still stands up to this day, and along with Zero, Code Veronica and the Outbreak Files, is one of the few games that still has fixed camera angles and tank controls, unless you're playing the remaster of the remake and using the updated controls like I do. The restrictions of the tank controls always make the game that little bit harder, and the use of restricted camera angles gave us that inability to control what we see, making us that little bit more tense. We have seen what fans of the series can do with the controls and view of Resident Evil 4 being used to make a new fan-made version of Resident Evil Remake. It does show some promise, and we know it's possible to make a more survival horror-based game using the mechanics of 4 and the 2 and 3 remakes. But is this going to take away from the uniqueness of Resident Evil? I don't believe so. The remake is still one of the most beloved games in the series to this day, along with 2, Code Veronica and 4. As long as the game is expanded upon and not had cuts that will upset the fans as we have seen in the 2 and 3 remakes, which continue to divide fans of the franchise. One thing that I had pointed out to me by a fan was that if you change the gameplay of the original too much, it stops being a remake altogether. So changing from the fixed camera angles to the over-the-shoulder gameplay could change this from a remake to a reimagining, which is really what the recent Resident Evil 2 and 3 remake games really are. They are only marketed as remakes when the gameplay has been changed a lot, and the visuals and story seem to be the only parts that have been given the remake treatment. Also, there was a fan recreation of Resident Evil done in the first-person style of 7 and Village. Considering how some have denounced Resident Evil as not being true to itself with the use of first-person gameplay, I believe using it in a remake of Resident Evil could divide fans further. But then we did have brief teasers of what this could be like in the Resident Evil 3 remake during the 2 moments of first-person gameplay and cutscenes. Now we must look at the story. The original was basic but effective horror trope storytelling which continued to influence the series until Code Veronica. Then 4 onwards took the tone in a different direction and upped the quality, while retaining some of the more ludicrous cheesy moments in the series. The 2002 remake was able to build and improve on the original so much that when many fans talk about the first Resident Evil, they mainly refer to the 2002 remake more than the original PS1 Saturn release. Considering how they have expanded more upon the STARS members like Richard, Forrest and Kenneth, it's fair to say the remake does deserve a lot of credit. Where both the original and remake falter a little is with the separate campaigns and the lack of a clear ending for all the survivors to make it out, leaving the Umbrella Chronicles spin-off to clear up the story. Then there is the big problem that the remake throws up, which is the Rebecca Chambers issue. Since the events of Zero only took place 24 hours before Resident Evil, this caused a huge problem due to her knowledge of the outbreak and Umbrella's involvement, not mentioning this to Chris when they meet, while also being as helpless as a fish out of water. Even though she took on zombies, Cerberus, hunters, eliminators, bats, leechmen, the proto-tyrant, and the Queen Leech, prior to the Alpha team even meeting the Cerberus in the woods. Also, any equipment and weapons she found would likely still be in her possession while inside the Spencer mansion. You could argue that she would be fatigued from the events of Zero, and that for some convoluted reason she had lost most of, if not all of her equipment travelling between the training facility and the mansion. But if the game is remade again, this should be Capcom's opportunity to correct this big plot inconsistency, along with giving us a clear ending for everyone, while having the option to play as just Jill or Chris in their own campaigns. It will still be challenging considering Barry's story has to run in tandem with Rebecca's as well. But if S.D. Perry can write the Umbrella Conspiracy, keeping an intertwined story cohesive, then surely a second Resident Evil remake could do it too. So after looking at the visuals, gameplay and story, the last big question we must really ask is, would it be worth it? Not only from a fan perspective, but also from Capcom's. Resident Evil across its original and remake and remaster has sold very well overall. We have been treated to the first Resident Evil in its initial incarnation on the PS1 as an original release, a director's cut, and finally a DualShock release, and then the Sega Saturn and PC, and later the expansion on the DS as Deadly Silence in 2006. With 5.3 million units sold since 1996, making 467 million with inflation. Then in 2002 we got the remake on the GameCube, along with Zero to act as a prequel. The remake would do good numbers on the GameCube, but would do better ending up on the Wii, shifting 1.35 million units across both platforms, making 96 million with inflation. Then in 2014 on PS3 it was remastered, gaining huge sales dwarfing its GameCube and Wii launches, then finally on Steam a year later to bolster its numbers to a total of 4 million units sold on PS3 and Steam only, but not grossing as much as its GameCube and Wii releases, making only 65.6 million in its lifetime across PS3 and Steam, even though it shipped over 2.5 million more units than its initial release on GameCube and Wii. Still, the demand was there for the game. The Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 remakes have both sold a lot more units and made nearly the same money that the original, remake and remaster combined in such a short a time, with the 2 remakes selling 8.1 million units and making 432 million on its own. 3 has sold a solid 4 million, making an estimated 216 million so far, giving us a total of 648 million from 2 and 3 since 2019, which dwarfs the first Resident Evil's total sales, but not money made at 651 million. But this could change over time with ports to other future console generations such as PS5. The numbers of sales and money that remakes pull in now will likely mean another Resident Evil could be a decent profit for Capcom. It's all down to if the fans want this bad enough. Considering the reception of Resident Evil 3's remake compared to the 2 remake though, this makes it a little uncertain. From what I have seen of the fan demand of remakes, the biggest remake requests I have seen have been for 4, Code Veronica and Outbreak Files, along with the release of new entries like Revelations 3 and Resident Evil 9. We know there are 2 yet unannounced games yet to be released, codenamed Outrage and Armageddon, but only based on leaks, rumours and hearsay at this point. Even director's cuts of the 2 and 3 remakes have been in more demand than a second remake of Resident Evil. I am sure fans would welcome another remake, but they, like myself, would be very cautious, since the 2 and 3 remakes didn't really live to some of our high expectations, and taking a near-perfect game and tearing it down could just alienate fans further. Now from Capcom's view, are they really going to benefit from another remake? The 2002 remake did net them 184 million across all ports and remasters over a 13-year period, but they also sold more with the Resident Evil 3 remake in 1 year, along with Resident Evil 2 remake making 432 million on its own in only 2 years. Even Resident Evil 4 with its countless ports and remasters over 16 years has made 474 million. Financially, Capcom may not take the plunge and do it. The volume and demand could be there, but with a potential 4 remake, 4 VR and Village looking to dwarf those figures, another Resident Evil remake would have to be a passion project, and not something they expect to make a huge astronomical profit on. I can understand the reasons for wanting this remade, with some reasons being different, with the main one for me being to fix the Resident Evil 0 plot links to the first game, and the potential for a clear ending. But from what I can see, there isn't enough fan demand, the lack of a huge return compared to the last few Resident Evil games for Capcom, and the biggest reason of all, it feels too soon. It doesn't feel like the right time to remake this game when the current form of the game still stands the test of time very well. We only had the game remastered for PS3 and PC barely 7 years ago. The time and energy in rebuilding an older Resident Evil title should go into one of the games that hasn't been recently ported, or can benefit the most from a fresh look. And the first Resident Evil isn't due that treatment for maybe another decade. Capcom has so much choice when it comes to remaking classic titles or remastering to bring older games to the present. The list includes the original Resident Evil trilogy as a remastered collection, like the Crash Bandicoot Insane trilogy or the Spyro trilogy remaster. Remaking or reimagining the Outbreak Files, Code Veronica and even Survivor could be more interesting. Even the long extinct Dino Crisis series could be remade and relaunched as a new series, where we retain a lot of the story, setting and gameplay of the first 2 games, and completely rebuild 3 from the ground up. But for now, where Capcom goes with this long-standing survival horror saga is in their hands. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video. What are your thoughts on Resident Evil getting a second remake? Do you think now is the time to return to the Spencer Mansion? Or should we focus more on other remakes or the future of the series? Comment with your thoughts below. Please do remember to like and share this video across social media, and subscribe to keep up to date with new videos. Thank you Rezzers, and I'll see you all again soon.